Hi, Todd, we're going to go back on and we're going to finish your initial interview, which now has taken three different times. So I appreciate your willingness to continue to accommodate us. And as you know, we're probably going to interview you one time at the end as a wrap up. So I just have some questions about best practices. Um, uh, what do you believe is the best practice for the valuation of real estate for an assessor?
Could you clarify that? I mean, it's kind of a broad
It's a
term.
very broad question. Let me ask. What do you think is the best? What are the best practices for valuing real estate in a? But let me put this way. What are the? Let's split up. What are the best practices for valuing residential real estate in a revaluation?
Not quite sure how to answer that, but I guess my best answer would be just to be fair and equitable to everybody, treat everybody the same.
When I say when I say best practices, for example, for residential, let me break it down. I mean, I know how these things work, so maybe I could be helpful. When you do, I'll ask some leading questions just to expedite this. So when you, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong with assumptions. So when you value residential real estate, you're doing it on a modified cost approach, correct?
Correct.
And a modified cost approach, I would describe it as you're using sales table. You're creating tables of sales for sales that took place in the area within a certain period of time, generally a year before the revaluation, and you're then taking you're taking the data from those sales tables and inputting it on a cost approach basis for each individual property based on the manner in which you've determined the relevant factors to be under a cost approach in the field card for the specific property. Is that a fairly accurate description of how you do it?
That's fairly accurate. You're basically backing into the cost. You're using the sales to help you develop the cost tables, and then you're taking those cost models and tables and verifying that with a cost index, something like a Marshall and Swift, just make sure that they're all matching up.
But with Marshall and Swift, you're not taking into consideration comparative sales data, correct?
No, Marshall and Swift is strictly cost.
So in this, you're essentially doing a sales comparison approach.
You're doing the sales and backing into the cost.
Yeah, you're doing the sales, but in order to do an individual value of each property, you have to back in. You have to do that by via cost approach, because each property on a street is going to be different. Correct. Or could be.
Yeah, so the only way to value something that hasn't sold.
And in addition to that, do you take into consider listings for sale around the time of the revaluation for residential properties?
Generally, as long as you have enough sales, it's the year before the reval.
Do you take into consideration not just sales, but listings for sale in a certain neighborhood or street? Do you take that into consideration for the valuation of residential property?
Not if you don't have to. If you have enough sales, you don't take a listing.
Okay. And if there's an actual sale of the property within a relevant period of time, do you take that into consideration?
You have to verify that it's a qualified sale, but yes.
Okay. And do you is it a best practice? Is it a best practice to try to exclude sales which are not qualified arm's length transactions, such as distress sales, a foreclosure, auction sale, etc.?
It is.
All right. And do you do that when you do your revaluation of the residential property?
We do. The first part of a reval is actually field reviewing all of the sales to make sure they're qualified and any issues around them.
Do you make an attempt to determine whether to confirm that the sales were arm's length listed sales and would not to try to make sure that they're not sales that should be disqualified?
We do. My general practice is actually we have a questionnaire, a sales verification form that we try to give every sale or get in the hands of every person to have them fill out to get information to verify that it was a qualified sale.
And how do you administer that form?
Well, the reval company, when they go out and knock on doors, they will hand them out. If we have the time, we will certainly try to mail them to the address.
Do you do your own research trying to verify that to try to confirm whether any sales should be excluded by checking, like, to see if any of the sales were part of a judicial auction or a probate.
We
sale?
do. That really falls a lot on the reval company, but they do have an ML, and they have an active MLS account, so they're able to go on those, just like a realtor, to see the information behind them. They certainly come to me and ask if we have any information on it, if we know internally if it's a bankruptcy, foreclosure, family sale, or anything like that. So there is a lot of verification going on between the reval company and the office to verify sales.
And I think you earlier testified about how you value commercial real estate, correct?
Correct.
And I think you said you're basically using either the sales comparison approach or the income approach, and that for the majority of commercial properties, for income producing properties, you're generally trying to use an income approach.
We do. We send out. My practice is to send out an INE form, income and expense form, every year. And then we will use the 2 previous years on a reval to help set the tables for the market, the rents and the vacancies and such.
And when you do so, when you value a commercial property via the cost approach, are you taking into consideration both the actual income and expenses of the property, and also what you believe to be the market, what should be the market income and expenses for the property?
Just like with the sales verification, we try to make sure that they are, that's not the INE is actually accurate, not between, like parties, and, intercorporation. So there, the rents aren't actual what market would be, but we're actually using those INEs to develop what the fair market rent is for that year.
But aside from, whether it's an arm's length transaction, for example, for a lease, do you also take into consideration whether a lease is above or below market, even if it was arm's length?
We do. We're required to by the ethics. Yeah.
And so therefore, is it fair to say that you take into consideration both actual income, and what the market income would be?
And economic. Yep. We do.
Okay. So market and income, market and actual, then, correct?
Actual and economic is what we use. Well, we call it economic, which is market.
All right. So both for the income and expenses, you would consider, is it fair to say you would consider both the actual as well as the economic, or what I describe as market?
We do, yes.
Okay. And the case law usually says market, so but that's fine. And so in addition to that, for commercial properties, you would also consider, where it's relevant, the sales comparison approach. Is that correct?
We look at the sales. They're few and far between, but we look at the sales that happen.
And for specialized commercial properties or industrial properties, do you ever consider the cost approach?
If it's a new building, it certainly can be looked at and put into consideration.
What do you believe to be the best practices for maintaining records in your department?
Well, I mean, we follow all state guidelines as far as maintaining the records as long as needed. We do keep the property record cards indefinitely, even though you only need to keep those up until the next reval. Most assessors, me included, feel those are important and shouldn't be tossed away. But we have an extensive, Enfield actually has its own record retention person. So we store most of the stuff over in the town hall building, and we keep all the other records in this office.
And from time to time, you need to edit an assessment record. Is that correct?
In the working year, yes.
So what are the best practices for editing assessment records, which I believe would probably be more than likely, for the most part, field cards?
Well, there's kind of 2 parts of that. So you have a working year record database that you're making changes throughout the year, anything that happens, permits, name changes, anything that might happen with a property. Any other record, so when I sign the grand list, we will actually do a year ends closing on the database. And basically what that does is it freezes the data in that database we can't make a change on it. So once we close out the year and sign that grand list, the historical data is now frozen in time and nothing gets changed on that.
Under 12 Connecticut General Statute 1253A, you have the ability to value during an interim assessment year to value to retrospectively or to retroactively value as of the date of a certificate of occupancy new construction, correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Does Connecticut General Statute 1253A permit you to value during the assessment year new construction as of the date that the work was complete, a certificate of occupancy was issued?
Yes, we're allowed to. So if a building was complete 80% on of October 1st and they finish it on December 1st, we're able to add that 20% on as a prorate is what's called.
And therefore, you could go back retroactively to the date that the permit was issued under 1253A for new construction, correct?
Correct, but that historical data, so that field card from the previous year will remain at 80%. That doesn't change historically. Going forward, we're able to go and prorate it, and then in the billing side and the administrative side of the software, which is a different software than the CAMA for the real estate, we're able to make that value change to send the person the tax bill for the increased value. But that actual field card from the previous year does not change.
And you also have the ability to go back. Is it under 12 that Connecticut General Statute 12-60, which permits you to go back up to 3 years to clarify correct a clerical error or omission?
Yes, we do.
And that and while it allows you, while 1260 gives you the legal authority to make a change going back up to 3 years for a clerical error or omission, it does not allow you to make a change for a change in a substantive decision only for an actual clerical error or omission. Is that correct?
It is.
All right, and is it legally permissible to remove the information on a field card from a prior assessment year, such as the effective year built, without noting such alteration?
I would say yes. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure what the statute might be on that, but it certainly shouldn't be allowed. It's not something we practice.
So it's something. So you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't go back and edit prior cards, correct?
I would not. No.
And my understanding is that what you did this time was in the 21 reval, you suppressed the information on the field card regarding effective year built because it was not a factor that was actually used in the valuation. It was an after the fact calculation, essentially, or after the fact determination based on the actual year built and quality of construction. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, it's been a consternation for the industry for many years. Even when I worked for Reval, there's many towns that suppress certain information. Effective years, one of them. Effective areas, another. They have no bearing on value, and they basically confuse the layperson. So you go into an hour-long conversation on something that doesn't matter. Information is still in the system. It's just not printed on the card.
Yeah, you've chosen to suppress to not have it on the card, and that's a determination that you make as the assessor. It's basically additional information that could be another reference point, but it actually was not a factor that was ever considered as part of the reval.
Correct.
And as far as you know, I think you testified earlier that other assessors have similarly not have taken the effective year built off of the field card.
They have.
And as far as you know, is taking the effective year bill off the field card permitted under Connecticut law?
It is.
From when you started in Enfield to present, have you made any unrecorded alterations of, I forget, I don't even understand that question. I'm going to scratch that.
Everything's recorded.
Yeah, I'm going to not ask that question. What are the requirements under Connecticut law that you have to adhere to if you're going to remove a PA 490 exemption?
What are the actual rules? I mean, when we actually make that determination, just like the whole PA 490 thing, I mean, I notify the person. There's certainly, at the end of the year, there's a statute that you have to notify a person of their assessment change. So there definitely has to be a letter that goes out for any value that has changed. Actually, it's only if it's increased. If it's decreased, you don't have to. But we do it for any value that's changed. We send out a notice at the end of the year. But if I'm going to take somebody off of PA 490, they know beforehand. We've had a discussion, or have at least notified the person, hey, this is what we're doing.
And when you've removed a PA 490 exemption since you've been in Enfield, do you believe that you've complied with all requirements of Connecticut law in doing so?
I have.
What do you believe are the best practices for an assessor to obtain information from residential taxpayers?
On the property itself, I mean, if we use any media possible, whether it's neighbors, newspapers, talking to them directly, MLS. Obviously, if you can talk to them directly, that's the best source. But part of our three rules, or I mean, our three jobs are to discover, list, and value. So we use anything possible to discover property out there.
I'm going to ask you to clarify your answer. When you say anything possible, is it fair to say that is that anything possible that is legally permitted in Connecticut?
Yeah, anything that's public that anybody could get. Like I said, newspapers, magazines, building permits, neighbors. They'll come. We have neighbors come in talking to us. I don't go out and solicit to a neighbor, knocking on their door, but we have plenty of neighbors coming in telling us about their neighbors.
Is it fair to say that whatever methods you use for obtaining information for the assessment of residential properties, that you do so in compliance with Connecticut law?
It is. It's all public.
And with regard to, well, quite frankly, it doesn't always have to be public. I mean, you can obtain information that's necessarily not available to the general public if you did so in a legal means, correct?
Correct. I mean, if we have a income and expense or something like that, that's not permitted to the public. Yeah, I mean, that's one way of getting information that's not available to the public, but is legal.
Yeah. For example, somebody could allow you to come and inspect their home. They wouldn't allow the general public to do that. They allowed you to, and you took it into consideration.
Correct. Yeah.
What do you believe to be the best practices for an assessor to obtain information for commercial properties?
Basically the same answer as residential. I mean, it's not really any different. I mean, there's a few more sources like, ComStar or commercial entities out there and stuff, everything that track these things. All public information, public listings for sales, talking to brokers.
Is it legally permissible for an assessor to enter private property for the purpose of an assessment without first obtaining permission from the property owner?
It is 1255 gives the assessor the right to visit any property for a valid reason. My practice is to always knock on the door if it's a occupied dwelling, if there's an actual house on the property. Vacant property, if it's vacant, the assessor does have the right to walk on the property for a valid reason.
Before we're done, I think we're Matt, do you have anything else at this time? Okay, Todd,
If you have more,
else?
I'm around most of the day, besides a couple meetings, if you need to ask a few more things.
Yeah, if I have more, yeah, I mean, we'll just, I'll schedule another interview on the record if it probably at the end, because I want to, I mean, any questions I ask, I would like to have it on the record. With regard to the wrap-up interview, I just think it would be very helpful at the end, possibly to circle back with you and to go over a few things. Right now, I don't have any questions to ask you.
Okay.
So I don't, if there is a wrap-up interview, I'd assume it'd be fairly short, but we still have additional interviews to do. Okay. So anything else?
No. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.